I'll get started on my talk, going beyond code, why we need to recognize all contributions to open source. And I suspect you all can hear me, right? Okay, good. Just introducing myself, my name is Nithya Ruff, and I head the open source program office at Amazon. I also sit on the board of the Linux Foundation, and I work very closely with organizations like the OSPO at RIT, and University of California, Santa Cruz has also started an OSPO. And one of the roles of OSPOs, frankly, is to be a cultural guide inside the company, to the company, and to help builders and developers inside the company engage more effectively with open source communities and contribute back, et cetera. So this subject is very near and dear to my heart. I also happen to live in Raleigh, North Carolina. Do you all like Raleigh? Are you enjoying Raleigh this week? Yes, lots of good places to eat and things to do. Okay, I think contributions are so important, and one of the first questions I want to address right away is, why is it important in free and open source software to contribute back to free and open source software? And there are many, many reasons, but I chose to talk about three important reasons. One is, it is the commons. It is a common resource that we all benefit from. And if we do not sustain that, if we do not contribute back to the commons, it will go away. One day, if we keep saying someone else will do it, I don't need to do it, soon it'll go away. And sustaining open source, I think, is one of the big reasons why we need to contribute back. The second reason is, it helps everybody. It lifts all boats. If we have a special knowledge, if we have a special set of skills, or certain workloads, or certain use cases that we are testing out in open source, by contributing it, others can benefit from it. If we are supporting a certain hardware, by contributing it back, perhaps others who use that same hardware can benefit from it as well. And we benefit from open source, so we need to then say, I want others to also get the same benefit. And if you are looking to get involved in open source, by starting to get involved and contribute, you can start getting involved. So it is the on-ramp, I think. Contributing is an on-ramp to getting more involved in open source. I often get asked the question, how can I get started in open source? And the barriers to entry really are not very high. You don't have to sign an agreement. You don't have to pay a fee to join a college or to join an organization. You don't have to be inside a company in order to contribute. Anyone with skill sets and interest and desire can start contributing. So then, let's ask the question, what is the most familiar form of contribution that we often hear about? We're very biased in open source. We always think of code and software and technology as the contribution method. In fact, all of the technology and the tools and tooling and measurements are all angled around measuring code contributions. Pull requests, the terminology we use, pull requests, code review, the tools like GitHub, et cetera, are all geared around code and software development and code contribution. But to be honest, there's so many more aspects to open source than code contribution, and we need to expand our minds about other ways to get involved and contribute to open source, because we all come with very different superpowers and talents, and we all have a role to play in making open source stronger. So I think there's so many different ways. So I've listed a few here. There was a fantastic talk during the DE&I day on Sunday about code contributions as well. About other forms of contribution. So I would encourage you to take a look at that talk. But here are some ways that I think of. Governance. Volunteering to be on a board or on a community, organizing community, or perhaps on the technical committee rather, or some sort of a special interest group, lending your skills around coordination and decision making and writing process and policy and bylaws and things of that nature is one great form of contribution. So there are many people who are very skilled at doing that, either because they've worked in bigger nonprofits or companies, and they can bring that skill to the table. The second one, which is such an easy one, I think, is as users, we can be a contributor. Just by using something, filing an issue, commenting on an issue, or even talking about your use case and how you use it can be of huge value to somebody else. Maybe there's another user who wants to hear how are you using it, what is your experience, and even participating in user forums and answering questions and helping each other can be a big form of contribution. Translations, while English is the language sometimes used in technology and in technical discussions, having user manuals or other forms of documentation and community information, whether it's getting started guides or other things, translated into different languages. So if you can bring maybe your language skills to the table and help translate some important document, that's a big contribution. And community, wrangling community, being a community leader, organizing a meetup, getting people to participate, making sure people feel included, all of those are incredible community skills. And advocacy, marketing in open source often is called advocacy because you are advocating for the project or you're advocating on behalf of users. And think of all marketing skills we bring to the table, whether it's events or designing a logo or writing a blog post or tweeting or any kind of marketing skill set you have is very, very important. Being a mentor to a contributor. So if you are a committer, if you're a maintainer, if you can make time to be a mentor to someone who's just starting out, that's a huge, huge value to the project. Legal, one of the aspects of open source is licenses and the legal aspects, whether it's a trademark or a copyright or license agreements or CLAs or answering any of those legal questions. So legal folks are, especially legal folks who understand both the community sentiment and the community side of things, as well as the legal aspects of things, and are not just interpreting legal, in the word of the law, are so valuable and so important to making open source better. And then a couple of others, documentation. Documentation is one of the most underrated aspects of any project. And if you see successful projects, they have good documentation. Documentation that users can understand, documentation that developers can understand, contributors, et cetera. And we are really dealing with lots of different stakeholders here, and having good documentation is such an important part of that. And I think I talked about evangelizing in the form of users evangelizing it. But if you are a member of that community, if you can talk about the project in a forum like this, you are adding such great value. You are promoting the project, you're making that project happen. The other reason why all of these forms of contribution is so important is most maintainers are accidental owners of the project, if you will, or managers of the project. And most of them really started with a very simple idea of a technical problem that they were trying to solve. They weren't really looking to be running this organization with all of these needs that are necessary to make a successful project. And so helping a maintainer take it forward and fulfilling all of these needs that a project has is a great way to get involved in a project. Benefits to the individual, there's so many benefits of getting involved in open source. First of all, if you're thinking of getting into technology from something else, say from teaching or from writing or whatever, it is just starting to get involved by attending an event or contributing a bug or a comment or slowly ramping up that involvement, gets your work out in the open, gets you connected to others, gets you recognized as someone people want to hire. Some of the most sought after people are people who are highly known in their communities. Clearly, cloud communities are very, very popular these days. So people who are contributing to Kubernetes or Prometheus or other cloud components are very much sought after by people. The second one is, and this I heard from one of my developers at a previous company, and he said, I love working in open source because I get the benefit of so many people's thinking and feedback. When I make a contribution, there's so many great people around the world who kind of give me feedback on my contribution and who give me such thoughtful comments. I grow so much from all of this interaction. I'm not just limited to people in my own company, in my own department talking to me. I have the whole world. If you're involved in a large project, you get a lot of different feedback. And a lot of developers have said this to me, and a lot of people who are contributors in open source. There's a sense of purpose, and there's a sense of community. I feel I am a member of open source communities just as much as I feel I'm a member of my company who pays my paycheck, Amazon. So I tend to feel at home when I'm at All Things Open or Open Source Summit, and that sense of purpose that you're moving this forward, this community forward, this project forward, this open source knowledge forward, and bringing new people along is very fulfilling. It fills that sense of actualization that a lot of people look for. And then, sharing your skill and superpower for the broader good is also very fulfilling. I think it's the other aspect of actualization for me, is to know that whatever I've learned, I'm able to give back and scale and help others, is a great feeling. All of this, by the way, leads to tremendous career growth. You learn to communicate better, you learn to influence better, you learn to talk better, you learn how to collaborate better. All of these are so important to becoming a better human being, but also having a better career. And for those in a company who are struggling to say, why should I let my people participate and contribute? I would say, by having your people work in open source, you earn trust and a seat at the table in open source. You can't just go in as a company and say, here's my patch, please accept it. If people don't know you and see you as just being an extractor and just someone who's taking and just wanting to get their piece of the work done, there's very little trust and very little acceptance. So you've first got to earn trust by being involved and by being a good citizen. And we talked about sustaining open source. So, as a company, you're part of this community, and you need to help move this community forward. Certainly, if you have a new idea or a new project, getting feedback on your thinking and direction on your thinking is such an important part of engaging in open source. Instead of being kind of in this closed environment inside an organization, you now have the opportunity to get feedback from brilliant people around the world. And then talent acquisition and retention has been a huge, huge part of why companies are getting involved also in open source. Developers and contributors, I'm a community person, I'm a strategy person. I want to work for a company that's open source friendly, that's a good citizen in open source, that wants to be a good citizen in open source. And so you attract a lot of good people into the company if you have that reputation. And people want to work for a company and stay there if their work in open source is valued and they're allowed time to work in open source. And that follows with allowing time for developers and contributors to work in open source. Many times people will say, hey, you know, I get sucked into so many other things and I don't have time to do this, and I have to do it almost on the weekend or in the evening. Why not make it a part of the role and give people time to work in the communities that they work with or depend upon or are interested in working in? Let's see. The selfish, very company-centric answers are: it helps you reduce your technical debt. You're not forking a project. You're working with the main line. You have less maintenance to do. And frankly, if you want to influence direction, you better be at the table and you better be contributing value to the project. Otherwise, you have no voice at the table. How do you increase contributions? I mean, being from an open source program office, I'll say that's one of the best ways to do it, because this organization, whether it's in universities or public sector or companies, they're a group of experts or one expert who really care about making sure we do the right thing in open source. And so they will help people in the company know how to do it, where to do it, get the legal approvals, and make sure that it happens smoothly. The other one is to recognize people who contribute. And whether it's inside the company or in the communities, recognizing people who are really putting a lot of value back into the community is such an important thing to do. We have been, in the OSPO that I run, we have been making sure to put it as part of the job description. And I know a lot of my peers in the industry and a lot of other OSPOs do the same thing. It's really making sure that it's part of the role and that you're making time for people to do this. Mentorship, helping people, mentor them on how to contribute back if they ask a question. Certainly from a project perspective, the projects that have better documentation or better information on how you get involved and treat you with respect and welcome you are projects that actually succeed. Local communities are really another important way to get involved. In Raleigh, All Things Open has a local chapter, and they have monthly meetups. So if you are intimidated by this broad global world of open source, you can just get started at a meetup locally. And by getting involved there, you start kind of getting to know others. And from there, you can build your portfolio in open source. Universities are offering more and more curriculum around open source, whether it's, I know RIT does, UC Santa Cruz does, Johns Hopkins has started a program. I don't know much about NC State, Duke, or UC, UNC in Chapel Hill. Since I live here, I should probably go out and find out how they are getting students involved in open source, not just in development, but in community building, in legal, and just really understanding the ethos. Some of the organizations that are doing a really good job of recognizing other forms of contribution and not just development is the CNCF. They have a Chop Wood and Fetch Water Award for people who do, these unsung tasks and important tasks like organizing people or writing documentation or really kind of working on problems that nobody else wants to work on. The ASF does a good job also of recognizing people who do other forms of contributions besides code. So at ASF, for example, the Apache Software Foundation, you have people like Sally Kaduri who do the marketing and fundraising and public relations aspect of the Apache Foundation, and Denise Cooper. These are people who have been recognized for lots of contributions that they make. I used to love the OSCON event, and O'Reilly used to also do community awards every year for lawyers and community members and others who had really good contributions back into the community, not just coders. I'm ending pretty early, and then we can ask questions, or you all can take a break. So in summary, I just wanted to call out a couple of things. I really like the fact that we are calling it contribution today and not just, hey, make a code contribution. We used to say, do a pull request, or give code and things like that. But we call it contribution, which is a broad enough term which allows a lot of different forms of involvement, engagement, and contribution back. I would say, and there's a project called Chaos in the Linux Foundation, which is helping to measure and track other things besides code, such as diversity and inclusion in projects or in events. But they're also looking at other forms of contribution and measuring that. If we don't have measurements, those contributions go unrewarded, unrecognized, and so measuring that will be an important part of it. And then making it a part of roles. Many underrepresented and women often don't get involved in open source because they have so many roles that they're playing, and they don't have time to contribute. And if it's part of their job, they will have time then to give back, whether to attend an event or be a part of an organizing committee, or even reviewing talks for a conference, etc. And if you don't, then you will miss out on all of their impact and involvement. The last one I will say is we need to acknowledge that projects have lots of different needs. Projects are really mini companies, many organizations. They need someone to take care of the finance, they need someone to take care of the marketing, the community, the legal, the documentation, and we should not burden maintainers with all of those tasks. We should really be welcoming a diverse group of people in the project that help care for all this and help move the project forward. And there are frankly lots of great guides, whether it's on GitHub or going to really checking the web for documentation on code of conduct, or documentation on what's the best practice for running a meetup, or how do I what are the minimum things I need to have in my project, like a README or a license file, etc., are there. And so you can start with kind of a minimum set of things and then move from there and keep adding things to it and welcoming people to the project. So thank you for listening to this, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.